Hi Internet, this is Josh, and it's time to do a recap of all the movies I saw in theaters in February that didn't get a formal review on my channel. Most of these are holdovers from previous months that didn't actually come out in February. One of these films is also a Netflix documentary that I included as a bonus. Keep in mind that these are just my quick thoughts. I won't be going into depth a whole lot, so if I don't cover something you wanted me to cover, I am sorry in advance, but let's not waste any more time. The first movie I saw this month was Shoplifters. Well, actually, I fucked up and saw this film in January and forgot to include it in the last recap for January, so here we are. While I did forget to put this movie into my January recap, that does not mean this film was forgettable. This is a Japanese film by Japanese filmmaker Hirokazu Koreeda. Shoplifters is about a family in poverty that barely gets by from shoplifting and scamming people. Their lives and moral code is called into question after they take home an abandoned little girl and start caring for her. I thoroughly enjoyed watching the film, even if it was a little slow. All the characters are excellently developed. I felt like I had a strong sense of what motivated all of them, and their arcs are all very satisfying. All of the performances were excellent. Sakura Ando's performance in particular was very good. There's one scene towards the end where she gets emotional over how much she cares for her newfound family, and it's hard to not get emotional with her during that scene. The cinematography wasn't spectacular, but it was still very solid. The highlights in this film really pop and look pleasing. The music is the only technical aspect of this film that I felt underwhelmed by. It wasn't bad, I just didn't like the generic acoustic guitar songs that show up occasionally. I was also a little confused about the scam with the grandmother scamming her relatives from her previous marriage. There were just some details that I really wasn't clear about with that whole plot line. I would go more into that, but it would require spoilers and it would make this video much longer, so I don't think that's appropriate at this time. But both of those problems didn't take away from the solid direction, great performances, and the story, which was a real tearjerker. I'm gonna give Shoplifters a 4 out of 5. Next up is Free Solo. This is a documentary about expert climber Alex Honnold, who prepares and attempts the first climb of El Capitan with no harness. This documentary was impressive, exhilarating, and sometimes scary to watch, especially if you watched it in IMAX. I was super impressed with how well filmed everything was. They got all sorts of up-close and personal shots of the main character climbing. The conflict of how the camera crew may put too much pressure on the main character while he's climbing and potentially recording his death was very intriguing. As someone who does video, that was one of the first things I had thought about before seeing this movie, and I thought they did a very good job of addressing that conflict and making compromises to work around it. The film was structured pretty well. I felt like I learned a lot about free solo climbing by the end. It was very fascinating to watch the main character go into detail and explain how he's going to climb certain parts of El Capitan and what goes into every delicate move. The boulder problem scene is a good example of this, which was very well done. I do feel like this film made a common mistake other documentaries make, where they tend to keep telling you the same information over and over again. Some of the scenes with Alex Honnold when he's not climbing has a tendency to be very flat and move very slow. Alex Honnold is so disinterested in everything that isn't climbing that it also makes you disinterested in any scene that doesn't involve climbing. At no point did it ever seem like he understood the concern that his girlfriend had for his safety, and I can definitely understand why he acts that way to some degree. He's very passionate about what he does, but it makes him kind of come off as an irritable dickhead who's only happy when he's climbing, so I don't know, like when he's not climbing, it's just not as fun. With all that said though, I still thought Free Solo was a very well made film. This documentary in a way is an achievement considering the difficulty of what it is they had to film. I'm going to give Free Solo a 3.5 out of 5. Another film I saw in February was Can You Ever Forgive Me? I didn't go into this movie with super high hopes since Melissa McCarthy was in it, who's often in a lot of shitty movies with stupid, juvenile humor, but after watching, I left the theater very pleasantly surprised by what I saw. This film is a great story about a struggling writer who decides to make money off of selling forged letters written by famous writers and authors. It's a pretty funny film that really benefits from some great writing and 2 good performances by Melissa McCarthy and Richard Grant, who have excellent chemistry. There's nothing about the direction or cinematography that I would call super impressive, but this is the type of film that doesn't need to be a technical marvel to win you over. The story of this film is so good and so well written that you don't really need to do a whole lot to make it great. It's definitely a crowd pleaser to some degree, which I often don't like that much, but I felt like this film really earns its feel-good tone instead of just telling you to feel good, like fucking Green Book. I like this film a lot and will definitely be getting it on Blu-ray. I'm going to give Can You Ever Forgive Me a 4 out of 5. Another movie I saw was Cold Pursuit. This movie kind of sucked. a lot. It sucked a lot of chode. This is a movie about Liam Neeson getting revenge against a group of people who killed his son. Sounds kind of familiar, right? In this film's defense, this movie was actually different from other typical Liam Neeson revenge thrillers in that it did have a definitive style. It even tries to be comedic fairly often. It was also surprisingly more violent than I thought it would be. There were a couple of scenes where people got their teeth broken, which always triggers me for some reason. But even though this film has a little more intelligence and a little more style than other Liam Neeson action flicks, it's still really boring and really stupid. There is not a single character in this slow-ass movie that I cared about. At no point does this film ever establish the son character, nor does it give you any reason to care about him. He abruptly gets captured 10 minutes into the movie, dies, and it's treated as some kind of tragedy, even though the film put no fucking effort into giving his character any sort of meaning. It tries so hard to blend drama and comedy together in a really slick and morbid way, like a Coen Brothers film, but it's too poorly written to be effective and achieve that Coen Brothers tone. Everything is mostly uneven. It's either really goofy or serious, making everything feel so awkward and out of place. Every time a character dies, it will cut to a title card with their name and some symbol above as some sort of brief eulogy for that character. It's occasionally clever and funny, but it often felt largely unnecessary and annoying. The acting was not great. The villain was laughably bad and painfully corny. He's like a discount version of Henry Cavill, who's already a fucking B actor. There's a scene that was clearly meant to make the villain look like a hard ass where he's giving his 8 to 10-year-old son a pep talk about nutrition. And he says something like, "This food has high fructose and baking soda. All it's missing is rat poisoning." Ugh. It was a terrible line that was delivered in an equally terrible way. The cinematography wasn't that great. All of the distant shots of the city with the car driving towards it were clearly fake. Why couldn't you have just filmed a real-life city and get a real-life car driving towards it? I understand that filmmaking is difficult and the funds for filming can be limited sometimes, but that's not even a hard shot to get. I had a hard time staying awake for this movie. I kind of hated it, and I'm going to give Cold Pursuit a 1.5 out of 5. The final movie I want to talk about is a documentary that's currently on Netflix called Behind the Curve. This was a pretty funny and interesting look at the Flat Earther community and how the Flat Earth movement has exploded in popularity recently. It's a smart documentary that discusses what psychological factors go into people believing conspiracy theories. What this film does best is getting you to like these people and see them differently. A lot of the people in this community are really goofy in a charming way, and it makes for a lot of funny moments. There's two main characters this film follows who have wonderful chemistry together, so much so that it's hard to not like them and not want them to get together. Like, you know everything they're saying is bullshit, but their passion for what they believe at least seems genuine, and it does bring them together with other like-minded people in the same way a church does. And I mean more in the sense that this is a community that really clicks and has compassion for each other. I don't mean it's like a church in the sense that it's like a cult or something like that. It's so funny to see how these people will disprove their own arguments repeatedly with their own science experiments and still refuse to accept the results and evidence contradicting their beliefs. Overall, this is a really refreshing documentary about a subculture of people that I felt like I learned a lot more about. This film makes a good case on how we should approach people who believe something that's clearly absurd and untrue. You should check it out if you get the chance, and I'm going to give Behind the Curve a 3.5 out of 5. Thanks for watching, guys. February was a pretty good month, I would say. Maybe not in terms of what actually came out this month, but just in terms of what I saw in theaters. Stay tuned for future reviews, recaps, and other content. Be sure to hit the like button and subscribe if you like what you see, and I will talk to you in the next video.